understanding that the last time I saw your stuff was I did the cover for your novel.
Yeah,
It,
that's right.
it's out now. How's it doing?
It's not quite out yet. So there are it's taken a little while, but it's in progress. I think now there are advanced copies out and things like that. I actually haven't seen a physical copy yet myself, but I think Jack Bantry, guy in charge of Splatterpunk. I know you guys have a relationship. I think that he's in process of sending out advanced copies to reviewers and things like that. I don't know if he's like still like checking, making sure everything's like good in print and looks good, stuff like that. So it's not quite out yet. It's almost there, but it should be out very soon.
Yeah, I am really proud of it. Like I remember when his stuff first started coming out, and like I did cover for the first magazine, and it seemed like that was the first issue. It was a one-off. There wasn't a lot of backstory behind it, but it seems like he's really like involved in a full-on publishing company and doing a lot more these days. I love to see that. I love to see people like going ahead and succeeding with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's nice to see, and like interestingly, he's from my hometown as well. I don't know
That's
if
what I
you
was
know.
going to ask you. I was going to ask you where you're
Yeah.
from because they can hear the
Uh-huh.
accent.
Yeah, so I'm from Thirsk in North Yorkshire in England originally, and it's kind of a crazy little Yorkshire market town. Actually, there's a lot of culture seems to come out of there. Like I grew up in the '90s as a teenager, and there was like a big punk scene, and Jack Bantry was part of that scene. There were a lot of zines and bands and things for such a small market town. It's
Oh, that's
kind of
great.
an
Yeah.
interesting place, yeah. And so like it's nice to see that he's getting out there and doing it. It doesn't surprise me because like that scene was so vibrant of people putting out zines and things like that was quite a thing when we were teenagers and stuff like that. So he already had that basis of like he's done this before, he's seen other people do it, he knows how it works, and he wanted to do it, so he went and did it. And it's great to have that around.
Yeah, I remember when it first came up, I was like, Splatterpunk, so it's horror and punk. It's right up my alley. I'd love to do
Yeah.
this. So I didn't know it was gonna blow up as big as it did. You get some really big name authors in there.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I think he's done a good thing, like just taking that name. It's a genre that came out in the '80s, with this kind of extreme gore kind of attitude. Just try, like that kind of horror that's like disgusting as well. That sort of thing, and like just taking that name and making it something that's like constant and solid. Splatterpunk Zine, I think it's really good, and that he's taking that into a publishing company it's also excellent.
Well, it's funny how much stuff has evolved over time. Like I remember horror, like back in the day. I mean, I spoiler alert, I'm old, but I
Yeah.
remember like back in the day, like horror was like a couple things. It would now be PG, but at the time it was like that was R almost X, and like now people go to like further and further and further extremes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's this part of it, though, isn't it? I mean, like, once we've read that kind of extreme thing, and we've been there and we've done that, and we're familiar with
I
it.
mean, the next thing to like
Yeah, it's like,
the
yeah,
boundaries or
yeah.
whatever.
What's the next boundary we can push? I think splatterpunk is very much a genre that's trying to do that. So, what is the next extreme? What's the next thing that you can do that's going to shock your audience?
Right.
When they've already seen like dismemberment and all of this kind of thing, like what's next? It's difficult, but like I think they're still managing to do it. I think they're still managing to push boundaries and challenges with their horror.
Well, I think it's cool when people bring extreme elements into it, but some people just go for the shock value, and
uh
that really doesn't get me. Like, I don't know if you saw a Serbian film. You know,
I never caught that one. I've heard of it, I know of it, but I
yeah,
never
don't
saw
watch
it.
it. It's not that good.
No. Okay.
Basically, this guy's like a porn star, and he gets all like fucked up on drugs and everything. And ends up raping a baby. It's like, why
Okay.
would I want to see that?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's shocking, but it's not good. Like, I want
uh
a well-told story.
Yeah, and I think like it depends on what are your motives. If it's just to like, oh, I'm just going to do something extreme just for the sake of it, I
Right.
guess, like there needs to be something else in there, like um if you take like Sam Raimi movies,
Right.
like
I'm a big Sam Raimi fan, especially
yeah,
the
me,
early
yeah,
stuff.
me too.
I have
Uh,
Evil Dead tattooed on my fingers.
Awesome, excellent, yeah. And Evil Dead was like a game changer, and it's that thing. It is that kind of splatterpunk vibe where we're just gonna gross you out or whatever, but it's done for like comedic value. It's that sort of like I'm
And I
gonna,
love the
it's
story. There's a
yeah,
great story behind it. I feel like
yeah.
people ignore the story.
Yeah, and there is. You're right. Like, and it's so good he did it twice. Evil Dead Two is just like a strange kind of remake of it, where they changed the
With a
tone of
bigger
it.
budget.
Yeah, the tone and the budget. Yeah, because I guess the first Evil Dead, it was supposed to be semi kind of serious, and
Right.
then like I Evil Dead 2, you can kind of see like, no, like let's go full kind of slapstick with it. And it's great. It really works. And I think
I think
that's
he
it.
went a little too slapstick with Army of Darkness. Like I wish
Yeah.
that was a little bit more horror, but I thought he reached his happy medium right with Evil Dead too.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I thought, yeah. So it is a it's an excellent film. I gave Drag Me to Hell a second viewing, and I appreciated that more the second time that I watched it, actually. I don't know if you caught that or if you liked that one.
Oh yeah,
Or,
actually, the second time I saw it too, it drew me in more. Like the main thing I didn't like about that is the end. The end seemed very CGI. When she
yeah.
actually physically gets dragged to hell and she sees really fake flames and everything, I was like, oh come on. But I mean,
Uh-huh.
I watched it again. I was like, there's actually a lot of like really strong elements in that movie.
Yeah, and I've seen an interview with Sam Raimi, and he's like, he says he makes films, and what he loves to do is just sit at the back of the theater and giggle at people being scared or shocked or grossed out, and that's his thing. Like it's the enjoyment of like I'm gonna shit you up, or I'm gonna gross you out, or whatever it
Right.
is. It's that kind of enjoyment that I think we share as the audience. Like I'm kind of being tortured, but I'm enjoying it in the same sort of way we share it with the director. The audience shares it with the director. I think that's the thing about Sam Raimi, that it's like that pure
Because these like brilliant
enjoyment.
little tidbits, like when Bruce Campbell cuts off his hand because the hand
Uh-huh.
gets possessed, and then he puts a bucket over it, and he puts a book of farewell to arms over top of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a
yeah,
great.
like, and that's it. Like those little things, and like you don't. I think today a lot of directors would really be like focusing in on like, oh look, I've made this pun, farewell to arms, sort of thing. Where it's subtle, I think, back then, and that's it. If you catch it,
It
then
seemed
you
like he
laugh.
was kind of playing with it a little bit.
Yeah,
He was having fun.
yeah,
I
exactly.
like it better than when he got like really. He got more serious as he went along, and I still like. I don't know if you saw the first Spider-Man movie, but I could
Uh-huh.
still see kind of his like touches and flourishes in that. But it kind of got eked out as it went along with the sequel, and then the third one, which is pretty
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, I think unfortunately it's the case of, when you go Hollywood, you get I don't know if it's getting big producers involved and all of that kind of thing, but it just tends to happen to directors, doesn't it? They kind of lose their authorial voice in a way, or something like that, or
I think
whatever.
that's exactly what
Whatever.
happened because I heard with the third one, like they really wanted to market some characters, so they were forcing him to include characters in there. He's like, that didn't go with the story. It doesn't vibe well, and they kept saying, no, but we want to make action figures out of this, and we want. So finally, he was just like, all right, whatever you want, I'll throw it in there. It's gonna be horrible, and it was.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was. I agree. Like the whole emo Spider-Man and all that kind of, it was just like, it was cringy, man. It was like, yeah. So yeah, I think I think ideally, like, especially when we're talking horror and things like that, big budget is not the ideal, because I think too many producers are involved, studios like
It's the
interfering and
vision,
stuff, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that sort of
The
thing.
vision really makes it.
Uh-huh.
I feel like kind of like in the '80s, a lot of people they had great visions, and even if they didn't have a ton of money behind it, they still managed to make something good out of it. Like Pumpkinhead. Have you seen the movie Pumpkinhead?
Yeah.
So it's a great story, and they just managed to get it across. Like, I don't know if you saw some of the later Pumpkinheads. I don't
No,
think.
I only ever caught the first one, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like the effects and it's a very sort of fantasy world, isn't it? Pumpkinhead. It's like got
Yeah.
its own kind of vision to it.
Well, I love monsters. That's one of my favorite things. Like, I
Uh-huh.
don't even really care so much about like the fucked up people like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer nearly as much as I do like Alien or Pumpkinhead or
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
what I
I'm
like
kind
about
of the
your work.
same. Yeah, I really like monsters, and mentioning Alien was like a big influence on me as a kid. You know,
Yeah,
they were some of the first horror movies I saw, and they like really blew me away. You know, like and sci horror as well at that time. You know, I was really into that. So yeah, Alien, and we can say the same kind of thing. You know, Alien 3. I've got a soft spot for Alien 3, but it's not as good a movie. And the reason is, you know, David Fincher was just getting into Hollywood. It was his
oh,
first
you said
shot,
they
and
fucked with it a lot.
they were just like
Yeah.
changing it around. And like, if you read the story of the production before even Fincher was even involved, it was like it was kind of an amalgam of like different stories. So like someone had done a script about like these monks living on a wooden planet or something like that. Well, like that's the basis. Like the monks changed into prisoners, but it's still the basis of it. And then someone else had done a different story, and it just kind of wedged them together. So it was really, you know, it
Well,
was really sort of like to begin with, it was a kind of Frankenstein project, and then Fincher was just kind of doing whatever the studio was saying, where they were chopping it up here and there.
yeah.
Uh, I don't know if you ever seen the assembly cut of Alien 3. It's a little bit better. It's like,
I might have. I like Fincher's later stuff, and I think he probably did a way better version of that original Alien movie. It's just the studio fucked them so much, and he had no say so.
yeah, and he kind of just like was like, I'm done with that movie, but like someone I don't know who kind of recuts the movie in more towards what his original vision was. It's called,
Right.
I think it's called the assembly cuts, unless I'm getting it confused with Star Wars. I think it's Alien 3. Anyway, there's a version out there that's closer to David Fincher's vision, which is it's a better movie. Yeah.
I
So
believe it. I know they fucked with a lot of people. Like over in the UK, like one of my favorite authors from there, Alan Moore. And when Alan Moore came, and he was like, at first they're like, well, you're a talent, and that's what Hollywood and big companies love to do. They go, you're a talent, people like you, but we're going to tell you how to advertise it to commercial audience, and then they try and ruin it. And with Alan Moore, when he came over, they gave him Swamp Thing because it was about to be canceled. I think it was like one issue away from it, but they matched him up with a great artistic team. So it was that artistic team and him, and he made it a bestseller. Like I don't know if you read his Swamp Things, but it's like there's
no,
straight up horror stories, and they're I would say that illustration team, they heavily inspired my artwork, and I think they're to this day the best team for comic books. Period. And
uh,
Alan Moore is an amazing writer, and like each issue that came out was like a fully developed story. And so by him taking it from like a title about to be canceled to one that's like getting accolades in like Time Magazine, Newsweek, and all this stuff, then they just bought Charleston Comics, which went out of business. So they bought their whole stock of characters and they gave it to him, and that was the core of Watchmen. But when they gave it to him and he starts writing Watchmen, and they're all fucked up and they're like killing people and they're dying, or whatever. They're like, wait a minute, we just bought these. You can't ruin all these characters. So we had to rename all of them. So they're all kind of like based off Charleston characters, but they're
okay,
slightly different. So then it came out with Watchmen, and they at the time I remember direct market comic books were a very limited field. So you had a couple of shops that sold them, but most comics sold at like 7-Eleven and stuff like that. So they're like, Watchmen is too extreme to for 7-Eleven to carry it, but we'll just have it in
okay,
like independent comic shops, and labels do this with artists. They're like, oh, it'll give us indie cred. Like people think that we're good, so they're putting it out. And at first they weren't giving him any rights to it, but they're like, you know what? We renew the rights every like 6 months or whatever. We just won't revert it, and they'll go to you, and you can do whatever with it. We just want to look like we put out something that'll give us some credibility. And then it blew up. It was all over, all the magazines. He won like I know there's a bit of controversy. He won I think it was the World Fantasy Awards or World Sci-Fi
Okay.
Awards and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And after that happened, they've renewed it every single time. So to this day, he still does not have the rights. And
Yeah.
then they were putting out stuff like Watchmen T-shirts and Watchmen watches and Watchmen posters. And he goes, "Well, where's my percentage?" And they go, "Oh no, this is publicity for your comic book." Yeah, they
Yeah.
royally screwed him. So I know that's happened with a lot of people. Not to get off on a tangent, but I know that
Yeah.
happened with Frank Miller, who wrote the Dark Knight, and he was like a big name after Dark Knight. So they came to him for RoboCop 2. So he wrote RoboCop 2. And they're like, "Well, you probably wrote a good story, but you don't know Hollywood." So they had somebody coming in and rewrite it, and it was garbage. And so they asked him to come back and rewrite what the other guy fucked up. He's like, "No, screw you." So then they had a third person come in and rewrite it. And so if you watch RoboCop 2, it's like it has 3 screenwriters listed. But yeah, they do that all the time. It's like it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, and I think it's a big problem with Hollywood and generally getting things out there and getting them published is, like the business side of it, they're too timid, they're too afraid of their audience and things like that. Whereas, I think in general artists, and if you're a horror artist or whatever, you're trying to challenge your audience, you're trying to scare them, like that sort of thing. And like you've got the vision, and I think we need to like trust in the artistic vision a little more in society. And I think now it's got to the point where there's always a producer there's always someone in business who's editing out all of these things. Like if you look back at Spielberg movies for kids, they used to have some like horror in them. They have horror scenes. Like even like we think of Spielberg as like this kind of popcorn, syrupy family movies, and they are. But like there's like horror scenes in E.T. at the start where you don't know what's coming out of the bushes, sort of thing. Or you don't know what E.T. is. That's all. That scene's kind of set up as a horror, and there are definitely scenes in Indiana Jones that are kind of set up as horror. All those kind of things. And so even Spielberg knew like kids want horror. They want to be scared and challenged and that
I
sort of
remember
thing.
back in the day when they came out, like it was still shocking and like crossing boundaries back in the day, like Indiana Jones when like the Nazis' faces melt off and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
exactly.
And I was like, "Holy shit! I can't believe that just happened." But I mean, now it would be nothing. But I mean, when did that movie come out?
Yeah, like I can't remember which one it is. So it's like at latest mid 80s, right? Yeah. So there you go. I think they were around from about 1979 to 85, right? Those 3 movies. Yeah, Star Wars. Like at the start, towards the start of Star Wars, you see like Luke's aunt and uncle as like burnt, smoldering corpses.
Right.
Like he goes back
And it
he's like,
gets cut off.
yeah, exactly. Like, but that's that. As I remember being a kid and a teenager, it's like there's a certain taboo around horror and that sort of thing. It's for the grown-up kids, it's for the teenagers, it's for the grown-up kids, and as a younger kid you're always like, oh, I want to see that, I want to I want to be excited and scared. There's something there about it, whereas like family movies are good or whatever, but like they don't I don't think it's what a kid is like necessarily. Oh, I want to sit down and watch a family movie. It's like I want to watch the tops of shelf stuff, right? I want to watch the horror movie. I think like part of that was how I got into horror.
Right.
Always that sort of like, oh, I'm too young for this or whatever. Or, I want to get to that next level and see what the big kids are seeing and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So, was your intent originally to get into horror? Was it like you wanted stuff more dark toned?
I just think it's kind of natural for me. Like I was never, to be honest, never. I was thinking about this the other day. I was never really a big horror reader. Like I never read a lot. I have read horror books. I got into Stephen King kind of late. So like, oh, I should read Stephen King, like because I haven't really done that, and I read a lot of him. But that was kind of late on. And I was thinking about this the other day, and actually, I was thinking, when did I get into horror literature? And really, I think I used to read these books. I don't know if you ever caught them when you were younger. I think you're a similar sort of age to me, maybe a couple of years older.
I'm 49.
Sorry?
I'm 49.
49. I'm going to be 42 next week, so
Okay.
not that difference. So when I was a kid, I used to read these books called Fighting Fantasy. Did you ever read them?
No, no.
No. Okay, so it's like you must be familiar with like Dungeons and Dragons,
Oh,
all
of
that kind
course,
of,
yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of like choose your own adventure books, but like
Okay.
that sort of Dungeons and
I used to
Dragons.
read all those too.
Yeah, choose your own adventure. So it's the same sort of thing. So my older brother, I have a brother who's like 4 years older than me. He was reading like choose your own adventure, and the other side was Fighting Fantasy, which is
Okay.
like it's like put Dungeons and Dragons in choose your own adventure form, basically. It's just really big form. They're really good. You'd really like the illustrations inside them. It's like all that old kind of fantasy horror, but it is horror. That's the thing. It's fantasy and stuff, but it's like you're creeping around this forbidden village at night, and suddenly this wailing banshee jumps out, and you've got, it's good, like you have dice and stuff, you have to fight it and stuff like that. But like, and the imagery is all like, it's like monsters and ghouls and zombies with the flesh coming off and stuff like that. So the illustrations in it and like the whole concept, although it's fantasy as well, there's a lot of horror in it. And I was thinking, well, that's it. I was like 6 years old and reading those. I learned to read quite young, and my brother was older, so he had these books, and I was like, oh, I'm going to read them, and that was my thing. I really love those. So I think even from then, and then like, I think my parents kind of let me watch a lot of horror when I was probably, again, what do you say, too young. Like some movies that are imprinted on my brain.
Which
Like,
I don't think is really. I don't think you are really too young. Like
uh-huh.
in general, I don't think people. But go ahead.
Yeah, like I mean that's the thing. Like they were scary and they were exciting and that sort of thing. Like at the time, I always thought, oh, they're not letting me watch this. You like I remember my feeling being, oh, they never let me watch anything. But then looking back, I don't know if you ever caught the movie Don't Look Now. Did you ever see that movie?
That sounds vaguely familiar.
So actually it's a really great movie. It's a really weird movie. It's not like your typical horror. But basically it's Donald Sutherland and I can't remember who plays his wife, but like they have a kid, like a little girl, and she's like in this red Mac at the start, and she's playing out by the river, and they're inside working or whatever in their house, and she kind of like ends up face down and drowns in the river. And so they go to Venice to kind of get over their bereavement of this kid. I think he has some work to do there. He's like a kind of art restorer or something like that. He's working in a chapel, and like there are these murders that keep happening around Venice while they're there, and he keeps seeing what he thinks is this little girl in a red Mac running around the corner and stuff, and he's chasing her around and things like that. The big thing about it is the ending, and I don't want to ruin it for you if you
Don't
haven't
ruin
seen
it
it.
for me because now I want to watch it. That sounds like an
Yeah,
awesome movie.
yeah. But the ending is like really, really sort of shocking, and it's just like, oh, it was that, and and it's kind of bloody and that sort of thing. 70s, so like, I mean, I haven't watched it for a long time. Maybe probably the blood is really sort of bright red or whatever, but it's like, oh wow. I watched that when I was a kid, and it like stayed imprinted in my brain, and like for years and years and years. So I didn't even know what's that movie, but just like the imagery of it was like, oh, I've got this imagery of that final scene in my brain,
Right.
like and I guess I was really young when I watched it. I guess I was a preteen, definitely, and like my parents let me stay up and watch Twin Peaks. Again, you might not say
That was a great series too.
yeah, yeah. Like I was petrified of Bob. Like he was scary as fuck, Like, but it was like really fascinating. It's really weird, really bizarre, and that sort of thing. Yeah, and I remember, I've got all sorts of first moments. So I can't remember which one was actually first. Like I remember staying around with friends and watching Terminator. I remember,
Which is also a good movie.
yeah. I remember being like 10 years old, and my friend was on a sleepover. My first Alien movie was Aliens, and I was 10, and like we were literally so small, like we were both. So my mum had gone to bed, so we couldn't have the TV up loud. So what we did was like we turned the TV down, and we put the like a single armchair like right up against the TV, and we both sat in it and watched Aliens, and that was my first viewing of like of the Alien franchise, and it like really captivated me. I think Alien has been a big thing in my life as far as horror is concerned. But yeah, it was just like it blew me away, that movie. 10 years old, it's supposed to be an 18, American Werewolf in London was another one. I remember seeing, the effects on that are fantastic, and I was probably very young when I saw that. So yeah, like I've always kind of had this thing for horror, and I always had that thing of like, what's my older brother watching, and stuff like that as well. And I remember being caught in his bedroom. He had a little TV in his bedroom, and he was watching Halloween 3. And like I was supposed to be in bed, and like we watched
Season of the Witch. That's the one without Michael Myers in it, right?
Yeah, that's the one where
I like
exactly.
it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and like when you're a kid, it's like you might think the plot and stuff is a bit scrappy. It's not like all there, but the effects in that movie, like there's this effect where like there's a woman in the hotel at one side, and she gets, I don't know if she's just messing around with so for anyone who hasn't seen this movie, I guess we should explain. There's like these masks, Halloween masks that they're selling that are gonna turn like all the kids' heads into like maggots and stuff, right?
I remember when the head got squished and all the came out.
Yeah, like there's a head gets squished. Like they watch like the ad for it, the promo or whatever on the TV, and there's like this special like
there's
chip
like this
inside
weird
it.
sing-song thing. It's like Halloween,
yeah. And it's if I remember, it's set to My Fair Lady, that tune. Yeah. So there's like a chip in it anyway, and I think if I remember rightly, I think it's a woman. Someone in a hotel anyway, and I think they're messing with the chip, and it just kind of like electrocutes them in the face, and their whole face gets burnt off. The effects on that are just like, they're gross, man. They're like, and really good. Like, so sometimes like, even if the movie isn't that great, and I don't think Halloween 3 is a fantastic movie or anything, sometimes I think things are just worth watching for like,
it's fairly clever for the time. I mean, it's not like a keeper, like RoboCop or Terminator would be like, still vibrant movies today. It's not like that, but I think it's better than like a throwaway shallow movie.
Yeah, I think so. I think there are a lot of movies like that. Like Poltergeist 2. I think lots of people really overlook that movie as like the plot is whatever, but like, it's just like a series of really good set pieces. The effects on that are really great.
We know the illustrations for that are by H.R. Geiger, the guy who did the real Alien. They brought him in. That's when he just started to be like the big Hollywood artist. So maybe the story is not the strongest, but some of the art concepts were great.
Yeah. There's this scene where is it? I'm trying to remember the scene correctly. So I think like something gets in the guy, and he like vomits out like this maggot thing, and then it grows under the bed and turns into like a kind of mutant version of what's the name of the bad guy, the preacher? I've forgotten his name. Whatever.
I remember he was like a cult leader or whatever. These people in I think the desert, and they all died or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, but it's like the thing effect kind of style effects. Right. It's like really gross scene. But that's the thing about that movie. Like, I didn't particularly remember the movie, but there are loads of scenes from that I watched as a kid that they really stand out. There's another one where the son's in the bathroom, and like his braces like fly out and start wrapping around him and like cover the whole wall and ceiling and all that kind of thing. It's like, you don't forget that scene, So like sometimes I think movies are worth watching just for like those amazing set pieces that they have.
Yeah, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, where he's like scratching his head and like eating little bits of his scalp. I forget the guy who he had he has a brain pan on.
I'm
most
afraid
of the places.
I haven't seen it. Maybe I should see
Oh
number two.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, all right. So that's fairly early in the movie. That's not a spoiler alert, but
yeah,
there's
it's
some
fine.
stuff in that, and I remember that was actually the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre I saw. And like you watch it now, some of it's a little bit cheesy, but some of it you're still like, holy shit. And when I was like an 11-year-old kid or whatever, when I first saw it, I was like, I can't believe they did that.
Yeah.
Guy's head like gets half chopped off, and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty shocking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, I think, especially like when you get into like back into classic horror, that was a thing that kids were going to see, or the young adults, I guess, if you were 18 and were like you were supposed to be and going to see them, to go with your friends or go with your girlfriend or whatever, and like laugh at how grossed out you were, and enjoy the sort of like together. I think that was the fun of it. Oh, like going on a roller coaster, that you're supposed to be scared and excited by it
Right.
in a very different way, right? To like,
That's a good
oh, like,
comparison. Yeah.
yeah, like how much you can handle, tolerate, of like, oh, his head's coming off, and as a kid, those things are like,
You're like, holy shit.
yeah,
Yeah.
like that's the first time you're seeing something like that, maybe. And it's not real. I think there is a very big difference between, like, if you saw that for real, you wouldn't be reacting like that. I think people who are very critical of horror for that reason, they're like, oh no, they're showing really disgusting things of human beings being hurt, and you shouldn't do that. We understand that this is not real. This is us going like, oh, like it looks real, sort of thing. But if it was real, I think we would, of course, we'd have a very different reaction.
Well, it's funny, like all the people that are actually real serial killers, they don't really watch horror.
Uh-huh.
Like the people who are into horror don't actually do these horrible, crimes.
Yeah, some of them are the nicest people, nicest, most gentle people you could meet. Like,
Yeah. What I was gonna say is, so we grew up. When I grew up, is like I had a military dad, and mom didn't work. We grew up at like little isolated army bases all around.
uh-huh.
So I'd just go to the library and I'd read a lot. And I remember I wasn't necessarily into horror. Like I didn't like straightforward horror where it was just slasher because that kind of
Uh-huh.
bored me. But I
Yeah.
really liked doing when it was a good story. It was kind of later on I realized that what I liked was it had a dark tone, but as long as it was a good story, it didn't matter if it was sci-fi, it didn't matter if it was horror, or whatever. I was wondering, what were your feelings along those lines?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been talking about the gore and all of that kind of thing, of enjoying that, but yeah, I'm much more geared towards story. Like, it doesn't even have to be particularly scary. It's not about the jump scares or anything for me, or that sort of thing, but it's about tone, it's about story. So I'm a big fan of J horror. I don't know if you ever got into that, but like
J horror? What's J horror?
J horror, Japanese horror.
Oh, okay.
So like, it's J horror is like a kind of umbrella term. I guess we could say Asian horror. So like in the late 90s to mid 2000s. So what happened, I guess, really was like, in like by the end of the 90s, American horror was looking really sort of tired. It's just kind of like copies of Scream, because Scream was like saying, oh, 80s horror is looking really tired, and making a commentary on that. And then like American horror kind of just like didn't know where to go from that, and just kind of were making, like these,
It
I know
seems
what
like
you
it was
did
kind of
last
stuck
summer
with
kind
like fucked up rednecks. Like it's like
yeah.
fucked up rednecks will do something along those lines.
uh,
Like you already did that.
yeah, it was either that or like the college teens, sort of thing, like I know what
The
you did
Friday the
last
13th
summer,
or
and all
something.
of those. Yeah. So I think horror was kind of in a kind of doldrums, kind of out of ideas. British horror, as far as I can think, was dead in the late 90s. I can't think of a horror movie from Britain in the late 90s. I'm sure there are exceptions. I'm sure something exists out there, but it's pretty much dead. So I think people were looking around for something, and Ringu came along, The Ring,
Mhm.
from Japan. And people were like, whoa.
Which
And
is a
it's
very
really,
good movie. I love it.
yeah. And it's all kind of story based. It's all about tone. It's scary because like, like what's happening. Oh, this is the vibe. It's not like, I can't even remember if there is a jump scare in it. There's maybe one or two, but like, it's not
I
about
think
that.
there is when she comes
Yeah.
out of the TV.
But that's kind of slow. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like kind of like, I mean,
It was well done.
Yeah,
The
it's
nails coming up from the floorboards,
yeah, all of
they're
that.
coming out of the TV. Yeah, it was awesome.
Uh-huh. And like Hollywood did manage to make a fairly good remake of that one. There are some other remakes of J horror that are not so good, but like
I
so
know a
like
lot of people are down on The Grudge, but I actually like the remake of The Grudge.
yeah, it's not bad. There was actually like a TV series a few years ago that came out from a Grudge that I really liked.
No, yeah, I
Like
didn't
a
see that.
retelling. I recommend it. Again, I think it's Japanese, so it's not American remake. But yeah, the Grudge is a fairly good remake of it. Yeah, the others were like I'm trying to think of a bad one. Um, I think I did catch a couple of bad ones, but yeah, it doesn't matter anyway. But like the original ones, there are loads of them. I don't. Maybe you don't know them, but here are some recommendations. Dark Water is really good. Did you ever see Pulse by
No.
Rose? It's right. That's a really. It's one of my favorites. There's this director who's really good. It's called Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Um, he's done a lot of really good movies that I recommend. So Pulse was from like 2001, and it's just like really tonally dark. He's got like this all 2001 computer technology, and like people are just kind of starting to disappear into themselves, and like everyone's just kind of disappearing like one by one, and like there's these like it's like kind of connected to like a kind of computer virus or something like that. They're looking at people on webcams in their own rooms, like kind of in like unlit,
I think I saw
dark.
a trailer for that or something. I
Uh-huh.
didn't see it though.
Yeah, and the concept is like that there is no more room in hell. Basically, there's no more room in the afterlife, and so like these ghosts are kind of coming and making people disappear into their own loneliness because they can't they can't die because they can't go anywhere, sort of thing. And like it's kind of builds up, and like just like it gets to the point where everyone in the world is kind of disappearing, like the streets are becoming empty and stuff like
Wow.
that. And there's like there's all these kind of strange things, like when people are kind of getting into this sort of like, I guess, being made to disappear by the ghost, they create these forbidden rooms that they tie up with like red tape. They close them off and stuff. You're not supposed to go in, and
No,
there's
it's well done. It could be really
yeah,
interesting. I'll
yeah,
check it out.
yeah. It's a
Yeah,
really good movie.
with There's No More Room in Hell, the dead will walk the earth.
Aha, yeah, yeah,
Which is one of my favorite movies. That's the line from Dawn of the Dead. So
yeah. Dawn of the Dead, yeah, classic, yeah. Um, and yeah, so and going back to J horror and Kurosawa, like he does a lot of he's done a lot of really good stuff. Some of it hasn't always been horror. An earlier movie of his that I also recommend is called Cure, and it is a horror. It's kind of more towards thriller, I guess, horror thriller. It's about a serial killer, but not in a conventional way. He's like a guy who can like kind of he could kind of brainwash people in this really sort of weird way. So he kind of appears to people and he looks like he's an amnesiac, and he keeps like repeating stuff back to
what's that one
people.
called?
It's called Cure. That's maybe you don't understand my accent. I don't know if you say cure a little bit. Cure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll check it out. I think with serial killers, like if you do it well, so it's a well-told story. Because you were talking about stories,
Uh-huh.
I think it can be really interesting. Like
Yeah.
American Psycho, that was brilliant. But then
Uh-huh.
there's somewhere it's like just a fucked up guy who kills a bunch of people and then he dies. And I'm like, there was no real meat to that story.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I'm not so much towards the slasher. I'm certainly not towards torture porn and things like that. It's not really my thing, you know. Um, but yeah, like this movie I'm talking about, it's not really. He is a serial killer because what he's doing is he's kind of hypnotizing people, and then they go and kill their family, and then they don't know why they did it and that sort of thing. And then there's this detective, and for some reason he's kind of immune to it. And you see everyone, like he kind of finds this guy and he kind of even captures him, and he sees him like programming everyone, and he's resistant to it. So it's kind of a battle between them. It's really psychological. It's really weird, but it's all about the story. It's all about the
No,
battle
that
between these
sounds
two guys.
interesting. That sounds very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So that's it. And like I do. If you're into kind of story based horror, I recommend like getting into J horror. Like there's a lot there that you can pull out. That's like it's all like it's taken from traditional Japanese ghost stories and things like that. Like Ringu, the woman with the hair and the white dress. It's a traditional Japanese style of ghost. Like it comes from a
No,
from
I
a
think there's like 3 or 4 Japanese-based stories that I've seen, and all of them have grabbed me. My girlfriend's Korean, so I see a lot of Korean stuff, and she's like, "What is it with Koreans in a family? Like they always have like incest or a fucked up family or whatever." I don't know if you've seen like Train for Busan or like
uh-huh.
Old Boy or anything like that. It's like, what is going on? Like they have some issue with that, but some of them are really interesting too.
Yeah, no, and like what I say is J horror. So it started off, and most of the best ones are from Japan. It started off in Japan, and it kind of started an Asian cycle of horror. There's a really good, I think it's a Korean one called Shutter, that's based around like
I've heard of
uh,
that. I haven't seen it, but
cameras in ghosts captured in camera sort of thing. So that's a good J horror, but it's actually Korean if I remember correctly. Yeah. So yeah, that's another one that you should check out. You say your girlfriend's Korean.
yeah, she's Korean. Um,
Yeah. So
yeah, I want to ask you. So the area that you grew up, you said there was kind of a burgeoning small scene in there, and that really like helped kick stuff off. Like
yeah.
I remember because I lived with a military family growing up. At one point, we were stationed in like kind of like white trash northern Florida, but
Uh-huh.
there was like a big scene of like indie comic artists and writers and bookstores and whatever. And I remember I go and I talk to them and I get feedback from them. And it was great. I mean, when I moved to Virginia, that was no longer there. But I
Mhm.
remember they kind of had all that going around. There was also a college there. A lot of people went to, so probably it had that kind of college town vibe. So I remember that really helped kickstart my career. Was the same thing going on for you?
I think not exactly in that way, because the scene that I'm talking about, it was punk. Like the kids were into punk. There was like a lot of kids who were just like punks. Like you had your, I guess it's kind of works a little bit different in the UK. At the time, we had um, you kind of townies, scallies, which were later branded as chavs. These kids that were really sort of they were rough. They were probably into dance music. They were kind of the bully kids. They at the time they would wear like like Adidas track suits, that sort of thing. There were those kind of kids. Um, I guess you
Like
had,
maybe what we would call here like jocks, like it's
yeah,
you know,
more
in
towards that.
Virginia,
Yeah.
they like
Uh,
drive by in a pickup truck and they'd insult you and I'll get out and beat you up because
yeah.
you feel like blue
Yeah.
hair or something.
Yeah, they're exactly sort of like, I guess redneck is kind of the kind of thing you'd be
Yeah,
you
yeah.
think of, that sort of thing. You just like um sort of, I guess, like I'm working class. It's not about class, but they can be kind of uneducated, working class, and not really interested in it, more interested in like kind of tribalism and kind of aggression sort of
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
that sort of thing. Whereas like, but there was quite a lot, there was kind of a counterculture in Thirsk, like strangely big, because it's not a big place. It's a market town. There's a clock in the center of it.
Okay.
Like quaint Yorkshire town. Actually, there's a kind of a famous author from Thirsk called James Herriot. He
Okay.
was he was a vet, and he wrote loads of stories about, I don't know if they were talking dogs. He wrote loads of stories about actually about a fictional vet in a fictional town based on Thirsk called Darrowby. But like those books were like world famous. We had like busloads of like Canadians coming around the town and stuff. There's like little James Herriot Museum and that sort of thing. There's a TV series called All Creatures Great and Small, which I think again the Canadians really loved. That sort of thing, like about James Herriot's life, I think, or maybe his fictional character. I never really watched it. I never really. It wasn't my thing. But anyway, so it's that sort of town. Like the famous person is a vet, the author that writes about going to the farms and putting his hand up cows or whatever. I'm not quite sure. Um, Small town, but for some reason there were a lot of like young punks in there, and there were like three or four 3 or 4 fanzines, you know, from such a small place. So there were people writing and putting out their own thing. There were a couple of bands. It's always at least like one punk band. You know, punk ska was really big, so it's like punk ska bands. And you know, there were usually at least 2 or 3 bands around as well. And then there were people putting on gigs. So like you get bands like you wouldn't think coming to this little market town, because it's kind of a center for punk scene, like fairly big bands, not like massive bands, but you'd occasionally get a band that you'd heard of from somewhere else, like coming in to this little market town. So I think rather than like in terms of literature, it wasn't there, but like people were doing stuff for themselves, and like obviously fanzines is a form of writing, so there was always that sort of thing.
Me and
that
my
was all
friends always
experiment.
did fanzines and stuff too. That was kind of a big thing that we did. Did you have like a club like we had when I was in Virginia? Like the closest club that all the bands would play at was 930 Club, and when I moved to New York, it was CBGB's. Did you have like kind of a version of that?
No, unfortunately not. First is too small, so it was what it was like packing everyone into the back of a pub, basically, is the way that we did it. In fact, a couple of my friends, a couple of punks, they got married, and when they were a certain age, they started to rent the pub where we had a lot of the gigs, you know, so they became the landlords of it for a while. And I think it was kind of after, that was like in my early to mid 20s. So it's kind of after that sort of teenage scene thing, but it was still kind of a good time. It was a bit of a crazy time because like, you know, these guys were like 3 or 4 years older than me, but like, you know, they're kind of still young people running this pub. You know, we had some crazy lock-ins, there were some crazy gigs going on. You know, there would be like, okay, you sit on the door and take the money for the gig, and we'll give you free drinks all night, you know, and like
Right.
you know, some crazy times. And then there, you know, a lot of alcohol involved, obviously, not a lot else to do in a small town, but you know, a lot of fun, a lot of, you know, just
I know my
literally.
experience with the punk scene here is a lot of alcohol involved. Like it just everybody is a ton of alcohol involved.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, like I think in Thirsk there's a problem with it, you know, like drink and drugs and things like that, you know. A
They're
lot of
pretty
people just
fucked
like
too.
every night. Yeah. um so I mean, that's the dark side of it. I think part of it, like the reason why I decided I had to get out of Thirsk is not to get into that, or more more that like I wasn't into it. Like after a while it was just like, you know, my friends would be like, "Oh, you're coming round to mine like every night," and it was like they would have a 3 liter bottle of cider, they'd be smoking weed, and like I just couldn't. I didn't. There was nothing in me that was like, "Oh yeah, you know, Tuesday night I want to smoke. I want to drink another 3 liter bottle of cider and smoke weed." You know, like okay, party at the weekends, whatever. But like it wasn't for me every night, and it's just like this. So there's all that's here. So like I was like, I need to get out and do something else, I
Well,
think.
when I was a teenager, I remember every single show I had to go to. I didn't, you know, it didn't even matter whether I liked the band that much. I was like, oh, well, it's kind of like adjacent to this band. Like, yeah, I'll go there, you know. And then as I got older, I got a lot more selective. And eventually I was like, yeah, I can't hang out in the scene all the time. Because some of it is really creative and some of it is really destructive.
Yeah, and I think you have to kind of find your balance with it, and you have to be very centered, because you know there's always that kind of peer pressure there, whether it's intended or not. It's like if you're not doing what everyone else is doing, you kind of become separated. And I kind of saw that, you know, like I go around to my friend's house and they'd be like passed out at 10 p.m. like, and then like people would be like drawing on them or like piling things on
Right,
top of
yeah.
them and stuff. And for me, it's like I'm completely sober, and this is fun occasionally, but like, you know, it's not fun anymore, you know. So like, and like you kind of just naturally feel that separation between you and them. I think if you're not really in that, and you're not really doing it all the time, even if they're not like actively pressuring you to do anything, it's like if you're not doing it, you're not in the same vibe, you're not on the same level as them, you're not doing the same thing, so there's kind of distance there. um but you know, like,
Well, I
I
think
guess it
some
just
people
wasn't for
feel
me.
like they want to do something with their life. You know,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I'm enjoying all this right now, but I really want to do something. And after
Uh-huh.
a while, it was like, yeah, I don't want to get stuck in this pattern where I just get older and older and I get more fucked up and nothing ever gets done. So I felt like I had to move. Like I moved cities. I moved from Virginia to New York.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And I got out of my hometown. I think the first place I moved to, I was at what we call college, which is, I guess, I don't know what exactly how you style it in the States, like the upper ends of high school, like 16 to 18. In the UK, we call that college, and
Oh,
then
really? Yeah.
yeah, and then you go to university. So like at college, I moved to like a town like 25 miles out of my hometown called Harrogate. So I was there. That's a very different vibe. Like it's a little bit of a richer town. Like all my friends there were metalers. It's interesting. Like in first, like it's more working class and there are more punks and that sort of thing. Metal at that time was like more of like middle class, upper middle class rebellion. So like all my friends there were metalers and that sort of thing. A little bit more stable. Again, it might come from like backgrounds. I'm from a, like when you're from an underprivileged background, I guess you're more likely to be doing, like getting drunk every night, getting stoned every night, that sort of thing. Than when you have mummy and daddy and everything's nice and stable and that's so it was a little bit more stable. There was definitely partying, so I got out there and then I moved to Hull, which is um, again a very working class, downtrodden city. But it's very sort of I would say it's very unpretentious city. It's got a nice vibe to it. I ended up going to university in Hull, but that was years later. Like when I didn't go to university until I was like 27. Yeah, but I moved around a bit. I'd moved back to Thirsk and stuff. I wasn't really settled. I lived in Lancaster for a few years, and then I ended up going to university and being at Hull, like in my late 20s until I was 30. Then from there, like I moved to Spain for a year, moved to London for a year. I'm actually
How was that moving to Spain?
yeah, it was good. It was a good year. I teach English for a living, and that was my first year of teaching English after university. I did English with creative writing at university, and then as I was doing that, I kind of realized that I made like friends with lots of international students, lots of Spanish people, Italians, people like that, and started doing some informal English classes with them. Realized, hey, I'm kind of good at this. I kind of want to get out of England. So maybe my route once I finished is to go and teach English. So
Do any
yeah,
of the students like follow your writing now, like the stuff you put out now?
students. I don't know really. Like I think there have been like a couple of students that because like I teach private classes and I get to know those students a lot better. Especially when it's like one-on-one and it's adults and things like that. Yeah, I think definitely some students have like bought my books and followed me a bit, but I think tend to like keep it shady in my classes. I don't go like in most of my classes. I'm not like, hey, I'm a teacher. Also, by the way, I'm a horror writer. Here's
Right,
my
right.
stuff. Like I don't know why particularly. I guess like if it comes up, like I guess I do, but it doesn't always come. I guess. Yeah. So there are definitely students that have bought and liked and followed my books. Yeah. But yeah, maybe that's maybe a source of uh what like a fan base that could maybe grow, maybe like hey
Yeah,
students.
maybe they wanted. I know that if I had a teacher who was also an author, I mean, it doesn't matter if you write detective stories, if you write, it might even be a genre I normally pay attention to, but I want to check it out because my teacher wrote it, especially
Yeah.
if it's a teacher I like. Because I know I had some teachers that were like they're like nothing. I had some I hated, and I had some that were awesome. They're great people. So I just wanted to check out what they were putting out.
Uh-huh. I guess the thing is, part of it is that they are language learners. So a lot of them, like thinking of it as a teacher. If I was like, "Hey, go read my book," or like, "Here's my
That would
book,"
be the
okay,
first language they
it'd
might
be
not get all
it'd
the
be
nuances.
beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be beyond their language level. I'm kind of giving them something like a real challenge there. literature is really hard in a different language. I speak Spanish, but like, I've been like, I'm here in Mexico. I live in Mexico. I've been here for like 10 years. But still, I find Spanish literature a bit of a challenge. It's vocabulary and it's ways of speaking that we don't really speak that way in daily life. So as you're learning a language, you don't learn that literary kind of language. With advanced classes, I actually try and teach a bit of literary English, try and get them. It's
I'm
like,
sure
hey, no,
the cultural cues, the aesthetics, and everything are different enough that they don't resonate with you like they would with like a native speaker of that language.
yeah, it's that sort of thing that like you don't get the references, and even like vocabulary. There are words that we use in written English, in literary English, that you just wouldn't use in daily life.
Right.
So like, it's like finding that vocabulary, finding those phrases. It's like another level of English. Or if you're learning Spanish of Spanish, like when I read Spanish literature, it's like I'm confused. Third person in the past in Spanish is same as first person. And I get really confused. It's like it could be a thing, it could be a third person, or you could be talking about the first person character who's narrating, and I'm lost now. Like I can get confused. So it can get really confusing for me. Like it's just another level.
How do you like it there in Mexico as opposed to the UK?
I like it. I think in terms of standards of living, obviously, like everything's very civilized in the UK and not so much here always. But the flip side of that is, in the UK, everything's so expensive and they don't pay you well, and you have to work all the time. When I was living in London, it was just like, they were paying me pretty much minimum wage, not even exactly full-time hours, and like who's just once I've paid the rent on my shitty apartment, and the bills, and then every time in London's an exception because it's stupidly expensive compared to the rest of the country. Every time you go out in London and do anything, it's just like you've got a hole in your pocket, so you're just basically working just to live. Whereas here, the culture is a lot more relaxed and friendly. That's the other thing about living in the UK. Everyone's a neurotic and and awkward, and people don't know how to socially interact. So like it can be, you turn into a neurotic yourself living there. I think quite a lot of the times, just because that's
That might be a big city thing too, because that happens here in the U.S. as well. Like the bigger the city, the more people are isolated, really on edge. Like
yeah, there's definitely that. But I think even like in small towns, not that people aren't friendly, that they can be, there can be this thing in the UK where you go to a party and you meet someone that you've never met before, you're drunk and you talk and you laugh and you have a good time. You see that person in the street the next day and they kind of do that, they pretend they haven't seen you. And it's not because they don't want to speak to you, it's because they're socially awkward and they don't know what the relationship is with us, and they don't know how to interact, and their reaction is to kind of like, oh well, if I pretend I don't see that person, I don't have to interact with them, and I don't have to deal with all of that, or I don't know how to act with that person. I mean, it's a very broad sort of brush that I'm using there. Not everybody is like that, of course.
right.
But generally, culturally, I think we're kind of socially awkward. Like you can get in a taxi in the UK and you'd be like, there's like an awkwardness with the taxi driver, like it's like you feel it's uncomfortable, and you're like, it's raining today, isn't it? Yes, and there's no conversation going. You get in a taxi here in Mexico and it's just like da 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 da, there's no problem. Like I think culturally, like Mexicans are a lot more relaxed, a lot more friendly, that sort of thing. So it's nice to have that. There's more sun, sometimes too much sun. So it's not cold and dark all the time. The price of living and the amount that I get paid here and things like that means I can live a more relaxed, happy life in general, I think. So for me, it's good. There are obviously, in terms of everything being organized and structured and civilized, there are some downsides to it. At the moment in this city, there is no water. It's actually a bit worrying. Like they keep turning our water off in the daytime. It could be like 3 days with no water, so you have to like this is a new thing this year, and like I guess like climate change is involved, and no, like it's probably corruption involved in that, like
I'm
they
sure
could
there's always corruption involved.
they the amount of there's a lot of industry in the city, and they take a lot of water. They could like reduce that, but they're not to make sure everybody has water like in their houses. But like so like we have to like fill loads of bottles and buckets and stuff up for those days where there's no water, because how are you going to flush the toilet, like
Right.
really basic things like that. So standard of living this summer has been a bit low, unfortunately. But in general, yeah, like I prefer to be here in Mexico because of that sort of thing where I'm not always worrying about paying the bills. It's not always just living, like in 8 months of darkness, working and getting nowhere. I can breathe with it. I can save some money.
Well, I've been over to UK a lot. I've been to Scotland quite a bit,
Uh-huh.
probably about like 7 times, 8 times, and
Yeah.
it seems like kind of, especially in the UK, it's kind of like northern US.
Uh-huh.
Like New York and New Jersey and stuff like that. But when if you go to the southern US, it's a totally different vibe. It's like people are more laid back, they're more communicative and stuff. I mean, the U.S. is huge, so
Yeah, yeah, and I think climate plays a big part in culture. Like so where when it's cold, like like people are colder. It sounds like a stupid thing, but like if if you're feeling cold and like reserved all the time, you have less energy, and like even the way you build your house to like shut the heat in, and you like close the like
social connectivity and so on.
yeah, I think like like here you can see everything's open plan, and like there's lots of light and like literal energy coming at you from the sun and that sort of thing. I think it does play a big part in people being more relaxed.
Right.
Whereas like if you come from a cold country and it's dark and it's cold and you're kind of in yourself all the time, I think that does play a big part in you being like a colder culture as well. Like I guess it's that, like especially like if like New York's the same as or similar, or Maine and all those northern
Right.
states,
Yeah.
they're more reserved or whatever. I guess it plays a part at least.
Yeah, it's
Um,
probably all like factors in, and you don't even
yeah.
see. It's almost like the butterfly effect, but with like social interaction.
Yeah, and like I guess there's that thing as well. Like if it's sunny or whatever, you can go out and socialize. If it's
Right.
cold, you want to stay in. You don't feel like going out so much, doing so much. So like the opportunities for social interaction reduce, I guess. Like in winter, I don't know where you are at the moment or how it is for you, but there's that thing, isn't it? In winter, people go out there, so it's raining,
Well, I mean, New
it's
York,
snowing,
right
it's
now
cold.
it's
Yeah.
super hot out, but I mean, it gets freezing cold and nobody talks, nobody
Uh-huh.
communicates, nobody socializes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but like I mean, I've never been to New York, but I've watched a lot of movies and seen a lot of people commenting, "I'm from New York," and like it has a reputation for being like a kind of rude sort of place where everyone's just like, I'm walking here, that sort of thing, like that sort of like that there isn't like that kind of friendly vibe. I mean, I don't know if that's the reality of
I,
it,
I
but
think
that's
it,
the
I think it's what
stereotype
you
of it.
just said. It's like people put up like social barrier a little bit,
Uh-huh.
but once they realize that you're a real person, they communicate with you. It's like I've been to areas like California where like everybody's like overly polite and nice to you, but the minute that you walk away, they'll talk shit about you.
Uh-huh.
So at least I feel like it's a more real interaction. It just they want to feel you out a little bit, but I mean
Yeah.
that also might be because I live here, so that's what I think.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, you're the authority on it because you do live there, and what I'm saying is just the stereotypes I've seen of it. So I'm not going to say, oh, I'm right and you're wrong. Certainly not. I would take your opinion. Yeah, and I think that's the same with any cold culture. That once they get to know you, it's not actually that cold. It's the same
Right.
in the UK, and like I think in the north where I'm from, it has a reputation for being more friendly, than in the south. And again, what you were saying about big cities, New York's a big city, London's a big city, like I think like they're not necessarily, or I think people can be friendly in London. You can stop a stranger and say, hey, do you know where this place is? And they will take the time to go, oh yeah, you go down here and do that.
Right.
They won't be necessarily rude. But then like it's got that thing where it's like a big metropolitan city, everyone's barging past each other on the tube, and all of those kind of things where people won't stop and necessarily take the time to be a bit human, unless you stop them. And then I think they probably will. But like, yeah, I think the south of England has a reputation for being kind of colder. The north has a reputation for being a little bit warmer. But we're all, a bunch of weird neurotics at the end of the day. We haven't really got like a set established custom of how to socially interact, and we're kind of awkward about it. I think that's the main.
Although I say in a way that's kind of the entire human race.
Yeah, well, yeah. And of course, very broad brushstrokes, because obviously you have people who are very good at social interaction and are very warm in the UK, and you have the opposite. And I guess the same anyway, like here in Mexico, I'm saying it's a very warm country in general. You get
But
weird neurotic people who don't know how to socially interact. I'm friends with some of them, neurotic Mexicans who, they don't know how to interact.
although some of those people are actually the coolest people you'll know after you get familiar with them. It's just the guards up pretty high.
Yeah, and that's it. Like often I will find that I gravitate towards those people because they're often there's a depth to them. It's the part of it is that they think too much about everything, right? But so they will have depths that are very interesting. Neurotic people, they are, they've been thinking about everything all the time and they can't stop. So in there is like there's going to be a diamond, there's going to be something that's like,
Yeah, they can be socially awkward, but they're really Elon Musk, so they're also brilliant at the same time.
Yeah.
Let's get to your writing, because I don't want the whole thing to go by and we're not even talking about your writing.
Oh, okay.
So I noticed one thing I really like that you do is you have like a bunch of different things that you kind of incorporate. Like I saw Rose's Ledger, and you have like a bunch of different elements that all kind of come together to make the story. To me, that makes it a much stronger tale, as opposed to it's just one guy who happens to knife people or whatever. It seems like you're putting stuff together. I also read what's the one you have one that reminded me a lot of Snow Crash. Have you ever read the book Snow Crash?
I don't know that one. Can you tell me what it's about?
Neil Stevenson did it. It's like, it's a whole mix of everything. It's like a little bit in the future where corporations run everything.
Okay.
Like
Yeah, the Gaia principle. So
Right.
yeah, that was my first book, and that's not even horror. That's like dystopian sci-fi, basic epic sci-fi.
Right.
So yeah, I mean that one was a big mix of like politics, climate anxiety, like hyper capitalism taken to its extreme in the future,
Right.
sort of thing, and where does that lead us if we continue down this path of hyper capitalism and that sort of thing, and also this sort of sci-fi elements of like kind of, so like I don't know if you read the whole book or if you just dipped into it and had a look, but like,
I just had a look. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, that's okay. It's a big book, and I guess
I read the whole story of yours that illustrated for the Obsidious Moon story for Tales for Dark Hours.
Yeah. So we'll come on to that one if you want. I would like to see what you think of it and your opinion of it. But like Gaia, going back to Gaia Principle, it's like about this this kind of supercomputer that gets connected into this AI that kind of gets connected into like the whole global network and kind of takes it over kind of secretly, and is moving pieces here and there. And this AI thinks that it is the evolved brain of the world. So the way that the AI is called Gaia, the Gaia principle is the title comes from. There was a book called the Gaia something else, and the alternative title is kind of the Gaia principle. But it's the idea that the world works as one living organism. So the computer's called Gaia, and it develops a conscious and like connects to all of the network of the world and like all of the sensors and all of that. So it kind of feels like it is the living, breathing brain of the world, sort of thing.
Right.
And feels it has the right to like manipulate and humans and stuff like that and all these kind of things. But then there's a lot of politics involved in it, where like we no longer have we no longer have countries, we have corporations.
Right.
So like
I read that.
and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Like it reminded me quite a bit of the novel Snow Crash. Not like in a rip-off way, but just like it kind of exploring similar themes. You should definitely check that out. I think you'd like it. And he did a follow-up, which also delves into some of the things you're talking about, called The Diamond Age, which is also very good.
Yeah. Okay. I'll definitely check it out. So I'm a big sci-fi fan as well. You know, like it's my only sci-fi novel. I mean, I only have two novels out as yet, actually. But like, after that, I think I kind of went more and more towards horror, I guess, and I'm more focused on writing horror. So yeah. So anyway, Gibbous Moon, what did you think? You don't have to blow smoke up my ass or anything. You know, like,
Well, I'm not good at that anyway, so no, but I liked it. I mean, with everything, I wish they were longer because I'm like, well, what about this? What about that? I mean, sometimes when it is longer, it kind of ruins it because it's better when it's all mysterious. But I liked what was going on there. I like the creature in it. I tried to portray it as best as I could. Like some people are very, very descriptive of the monsters, and some, like Lovecraft, are very loose. So I thought, like, I remember, like you're talking about, like it had two hideous eyes and like soft, like porridge-like skin and like one talent. So I was like, yeah, I'll try and incorporate all that and like I have it rising up out of the swamp and stuff. Do you feel like that was an accurate portrayal of the monster?
I think like there was definitely some variations on what I had imagined, but that doesn't matter to me. You know, like it's a good picture. It's some great art, and I like to see, like, obviously when you're reading literature, you're creating the image in your own mind, and for every person it's going to be completely different. And I think that's the great thing about books as opposed to movies, that there is that creative element from the reader. So like obviously like I say like porridge or like porridgey skin or whatever, I kind of imagined it more blobby and more amorphous, and you kind of put it as more like a humanoid figure. But like I like that, like I like that to be the fact that I can see into one reader's mind and see how they're interpreting it is not a bad thing for me.
Well, you know what I was thinking is, like Neil deGrasse Tyson was on Joe Rogan. He was talking about this. And he was saying one thing that really disappoints him is whenever they have like alien creatures like coming to Earth, they're very humanoid. He's like, why, if you're coming from an entirely different system, would you be so humanoid? He said the greatest surprise to him would be like if an alien creature came here and they had DNA. Because DNA is like a human evolution thing. It has nothing to do. So he said, like, the thing that strikes him as the most realistic portrayal of an alien creature would be like the Blob. So that's what I was thinking. I was thinking the Blob.
Yeah, and it's a great illustration, by the way. I really like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess you saw the mock-up of the cover. I think it looks really good. I really like that kind of retro look. So again, for the listeners, it's I'm bringing out a book that's kind of like an anthology of short stories wrapped up with a wraparound story, because I really like anthology horror as well. I like the anthology movies where they have like lots of short stories and you keep going back to like this overarching story that has these stories within them. So that's what I've done with that book. It's called
What about movies like The Four Rooms or Creep Show?
Yeah, exactly, that sort of thing. So that's what my idea when Jack Bantry approached me to say and said, hey, can we maybe put out an anthology, of your, a book of your short stories? I was like, well, hey, hold on, give me a second. And rather than just making it just short story, short story, short story, let's see if I can weave these together
Right.
in a way with an overarching
I
story.
like
So
that. It's kind of clever. Like kind of they're all in the same continuity. Yeah.
uh-huh. Yeah. So, I mean, the basic premise is like this new professor at a university goes and starts reading with a new colleague. Like he has collected kind of modern urban legends into people's accounts of them, that they're supposed to be true stories. Oh, this happened to me, sort of thing. And he's collected them into his own anthology, which he calls his Tales for Dark Hours. So it's the same name as the title of the book. And they're reading it together, but there's also something going on there that becomes another story of its own. Yeah, so that was the idea of it.
Well, I'll definitely read it when I get my contributor's copy. It hasn't arrived yet, but
yeah, I did push Jack to maybe give you an advance copy so that you could have a read of it before this, but I guess like maybe he wasn't ready for it or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, going back to Give Us Moon, the idea of that particular one, it's in Tales for Dark Hours. That's one story, and that's the cover you illustrated is from that story.
I'm surprised they didn't use the whole painting because they put a giant moon in there because this is Gibeus Moon.
Yeah,
they dropped it down. I like the cover. I think it looks very good. I was just surprised that they didn't incorporate more of it.
Yeah, I guess it was just kind of the designer's decision. I think Jack, I didn't speak to the designer directly, but Jack said something like, "Oh, I found it difficult to like fit it all in and get the title in, and that it wasn't covering up stuff, and that the monster didn't appear really small." I think was part of it. So yeah, I mean, it's a shame that you didn't.
I can see that.
But yeah, so I mean, that is a shame, but I guess that's the designer was doing the best he could with the dimensions and the font.
Well, it looks good still. Like the monster on the front, and you see some of the moon in the back. Yeah,
it's got this kind of 70s horror pulp look to it, which I really like. Yeah, I really like the look of it.
Yeah.
So that one in particular was like all of the stories are very different. Actually, I think there is a splatterpunk one in there that's cosmic horror. So that was kind of my idea of taking a Lovecraftian story, or talking about Lovecraft, and bringing it to like back to a small town in Yorkshire, so kind of merging those ideas together of like, because Lovecraft could be anywhere. Like I don't know if all of his stories are based in the US, but like, it's kind of, he's supposed to be kind of a global cult, isn't it? So it's supposed to be kind of a global thing.
Well, I think his biggest contribution to the whole realm of writing and fantasy and horror and sci-fi is his ideas. His ideas are really, really strong. I think his ideas are much stronger than his writing. I don't think his writing is bad, but it's not like there's some readers or there's some writers and you read them and you're just like, they could be writing about anything. They just like, they're so eloquent. And his stuff doesn't strike me as that. I mean, it's a fun read, but it doesn't strike me as like I read the latest book by Neil Gaiman, and he's so fluid with words now that I loved it. But H.P. Lovecraft has some revolutionary, especially for that time period, like the 1930s. Nobody was coming up with concepts like that.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, it's like another level of dark, right? So thinking back, like I really like a horror writer called M.R. James, and I guess he's from around the 30s. He's an old British horror writer, but his stuff is like very traditional kind of ghost stories, and that's it. Like you can think back to like kind of literature where it's just like something spooky happens and it's a ghost. He's a good writer, but if you can kind of compare to Lovecraft and what he was doing, that's like, that could be like modern stuff, like of today, like that sort of cosmic horror where there's like some alien monster in the woods, kind of thing.
Unfortunately, he was like a little bit too much ahead of his time, because I mean, if he came out now, he'd be super rich, but he died really poor.
Yeah, and that happens, doesn't it? People are ahead of their time, and then later they're appreciated. It's unfortunate for them. but he is a household name now.
Yeah.
HB.
Well, he is now. He'd probably appreciate that. Like, he really loved when people wrote stuff involving his mythos. Like, he thought that he might not ever go anywhere, but I'm sure he'd love the way it's evolved,
Yeah.
Like, they even mentioned Cthulhu on South Park.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like everywhere. It's ubiquitous, isn't it? The idea of Cthulhu, and just Lovecraft. Even involved in like Monty Python sketches and stuff.
Right.
Involved Lovecraft and things like that.
I think Monty Python's brilliant. I know a lot of people are like, they especially people that aren't British, like they don't see as much humor in it. But I don't know. I think it's very clever humor.
Yeah, it's next level absurd. I think.
Yeah.
Think about it. Yeah.
But I think that's what makes it clever. Like when they were all eating dinner and like a gorilla keeps coming in, like grabbing people from the dinner party, and like everybody's like not noticing that everybody's disappearing, and I don't know. I thought it was fun.
Yeah. It's just like next level. What the fuck factor, isn't it? Like, what the hell is going on here? And yeah, with kind of like late 70s, early 80s, I think they were still around. Maybe kind of. Those guys were from privileged families, so they're kind of taking the piss out of that sort of like stiff upper lip sort of Britishness, as well. Like that sort of like.
Have you seen the movie The Holy Grail?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was genius. But I don't want to keep you here all day. We've been going for like almost an hour and a half now. Let's hear some links and some way people can see what you're up to and get a hold of you.
So I mean, if you look for Daniel Eaves Storyteller on Facebook, I guess that's the easiest way. Also, I have Instagram, Daniel Eaves. Check out my, look again for Daniel Eaves on Amazon. I've got 2 novels up there. Rosie, excuse me, Rosie's Ledger is the more horror one. It's a shame we haven't had time to go into that. I know, like, I guess we've had a good chat, haven't we? We haven't gone into touched on a lot of things. So check me out on Amazon. That's the easiest way to get my books globally. What else? I think that's it.
You have a website or a Twitter or an Instagram?
I do have a Twitter. I don't use that so much yet. Again, Instagram is Daniel Eaves, and same with Facebook. I've got a page, Daniel Eaves Storyteller. And that's probably the easiest way to contact me.
Okay, awesome, man, and we'll definitely look forward to your stuff. Do you know when Dark Hours is coming out?
Should be any day now. Like I said, he's got like some advanced copies. He's checking that everything looks good with the advanced copies. I think he's going to send out some advanced copies to some reviewers, that sort of thing, and then officially publish it. But yeah, I don't have a date, but hopefully very, very soon. Keep your eye out for it. Please do follow me on Facebook, and I'll be updating and posting about that when it's coming up.
All right, well, I've read one of the stories from it. That's obviously a good story. And I can't wait to read the rest of them, especially to see how they tie together. And thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. It's been good. It's been fun.